Welcome to the Recruiting Roundtable. Obviously, I'm here, Michael Langston, Senior Recruiting Analyst for Warchant, and Matt Lassier, another recruiting analyst and beat writer for Warchant. And then we're joined by special guest and Steve Wilftong, On3's national analyst. Steve, first of all, welcome aboard. Second of all, I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, but overall, when you look at FSU now, what is the excitement level, one, and then two, just is this a program that can get a top 10 class going into this season?
Well, I don't know if they can get a top 10 class going into the season. Certainly they're going to try. They're recruiting the top prospects in the state and continue to push for blue chippers in the state of Georgia. But I think it's going to be a lot of wait and see approach with some of these top guys for Florida State. The good thing is you look at the way Florida was able to close in that 2024 cycle after getting some momentum on the field late in the season. I think if Florida State is able to have a strong season, particularly at the end of the year, we'll see Florida State be able to circle back on some guys that maybe they're going to finish 3, 4, and 5 for. And I'm not, look, guys, maybe they'll land some of these guys, and they're certainly swinging. Yeah. And this is a coaching staff that does a fantastic job of building meaningful relationships with recruits. When guys get on campus, they have a great experience. They feel at home. But I think we're going to see some guys go wait and see mode and continue to keep a relationship with Florida State. They'll win some of these battles in the spring and summer. But I think if Florida State has a big season, they'll be Spatula U.
Matt, you want to chime in on just maybe what your kind of expectations are as far as the class going into the season, recruiting wise?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Steve where it just depends on how they finish. There's a lot of guys who they were kind of in it for when it came to January and junior day visits. So you're seeing that on their original spring and official visit schedules that Florida State isn't included. It'll kind of be interesting to see if those guys still show up. Like there's guys like James Johnson, who I've talked to, said FSU is still in it, but obviously FSU's not on that list right now. Or when I talked to Chancellor Barclay from the First Academy down at the Orlando Under Armour camp, he was like, yeah, I think I still might get up there for the spring. Obviously, these schedules change all the time. Like you see guys who have a full official visit schedule and they decide to shut down their recruitment or have that whole schedule and commit somewhere else and then cancel everything else. So you just never really know. I just think you have to see who shows up in the spring and how that kind of goes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think the main thing, the main questions we got, Steve, throughout the week, I mean, some people asked some questions was, what win total do you think really just shifts the needle for them in recruiting wise when it comes to number of wins?
Well, they only had 2 last year, obviously. I think that Florida, but when you look the years prior, they had 13 and 10, and that's what you're pointing towards recruits and saying, look, last year was an aberration. Our starting quarterback went down, had a lot of key injuries. It was just a throwaway season. We've made some changes on the coaching staff, got some excitement, went out and hired one of the best defensive coordinators in the country and added some terrific position coaches around him, guys like Evan Cooper. And so I think you point to that. What's the win total that's going to move the needle? If they win 8 ball games this year, that's +6 from the year before. It starts to put you back on a trajectory of saying, hey, we're back in the college football playoff hunt. The ACC to me, is a very competitive league from top to bottom, but it's one where Florida State should be able to bounce back with the talent that they have in that locker room and the caliber of players that they recruit year in and year out.
It's really going to be the product of recruits need to be able to grab onto something. Last year, there wasn't much to grab onto, obviously, with things falling apart. But I think the
good players kept visiting, though. We saw Florida State close some major recruitments at the end of the cycle. The Seminoles got their NIL in order. These players have seen Mike Norvell be very successful throughout his career. And they've seen Florida State be one of the top football teams in the conference and in the country under Mike Norvell. But more wins obviously will equal more recruiting wins. But even last year, late in the cycle, 4 stars, blue chippers, they're beating Georgia for guys at the end of the cycle. This is a program with coaching staff that has recruiting chops. So we'll see what this season brings on the field. They just needed the season to end last year, and once that season ended, you instantly kind of saw like a breath of fresh air in a regroup that allowed Florida State to close out some key recruitments at the end of the cycle, land some guys that I think can be some big time players for Florida State in the future. They finished with the top 20 recruiting class. They kept Kevin Wynn in the fold. They flipped Usman Cromer, beat Georgia. Tylen Lee is a special talent, a 5-star recruit. LeJesse Harold flipping from LSU. Javon Boggs, who was recruit of the year in Florida for how many recruits he was committed or schools he was committed to. But Florida State was the last one, and that's where you want to be at the end. And he made a ton of plays for one of the best high school football programs in the state, Cocoa. So good end of the cycle. Showed you what they can do. Tayshawn Gelsey was a 4-star recruiting win for Florida State late. So imagine what kind of close it would have been had they went 10-3,
Yeah, I mean, Matt, we covered this a lot together. Just what's kind of your outlook when you go into the season of wins, of where you think it really starts to move the needle?
I mean, when was the last time a team had a top 20 class with a 2-10 record, kind of to go along with what Steve was saying? It doesn't, I think you make a bowl game, you get that 7 or 8, and I think you're fine because it's showing that you have an upward trajectory. As long as you're showing that you're getting better, you're improving, and you can still get back to that elite level. I mean, let's go back to 2021 to 2022. Like, that was a big jump. And then you saw that all the pieces were there for FSU to be good. You're kind of trying to build that building blocks again, just and do the same exact thing. If they can do that and just do incrementally better, like 2-10 is significantly bad. And to still get a top 20 class shows, and now you're bringing in new recruiters who are better with Tony White, Pot Roast, Evan Cooper. All those guys are known for being really good recruiters, and that'll just make it even better with more wins.
Did we just call a grown man pot roast?
Yeah, we did. We did.
Listen, there is a track record of programs that have had horrendous throwaway seasons and then quickly turned it back around the next year. When you look at a Brian Kelly team at Notre Dame, where everybody was after his head after I think it was a 4-8 campaign, but he made some significant changes to his coaching staff, including bringing in guys like Mike Elko and Clark Lee, who are now head coaches in the SEC. Notre Dame went on a run where they won at least 10 games, went to the college football playoff twice when they only had 4 teams, and were one of the top 10 teams in college football year in and year out under Brian Kelly after that fact. And then an even better example is Michigan. The COVID season was gosh awful for Coach Harbaugh. The media the local media, with the exception of a couple, completely turned on that Wolverine staff, thinking that they were not going to have to look Jim Harbaugh and those men in the face again that spring. But Michigan did the right thing, did not forget that Jim Harbaugh had a lot of successful seasons prior as an NFL head coach, as a coach at Stanford, and as a coach at Michigan. His biggest crime there was that it just took him a while to beat Ohio State. Michigan stuck with him through that COVID era. He had to make some staff changes, hired a brand new strength staff, new coordinators. Michigan went on to win the national championship. So Florida State's a program that has that same kind of power. We've seen them win a national title in this modern era of college football. And so I think Coach Norvell is someone that can look to those teams at Notre Dame and Michigan, made some changes, and let's get back after it and get back to playing Florida State caliber football. And they got a lot of talent in that locker room, so it's going to be exciting to watch it come together in the spring.
Some prospects that are going on, as they don't have a quarterback. Landon Duckworth and Bo Bentley seem to be the guys that we see. I think Bo's going to visit in the spring, and then I think Landon is as well. But just give some intel and just start with those guys. Where's FSU kind of stand, and just is there a guy out of that group that you feel like there's the best shot with?
Landon Duckworth obviously has Florida State as one of his front runners. He's got a really good connection with offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn that goes back to when Coach was at UCF, and there was some buzz that Landon Duckworth was close to jumping in the fold at UCF. He's a former South Carolina commit. He also really likes Georgia. Ole Miss grabbed some momentum following a really good visit to Oxford earlier this calendar year, but Florida State is one of his favorites. Bo Bentley recently saw his recruitment take off after leading Salina High to a state championship as a junior. He's one of the most prolific passers in this class. He played in the Navy All-America Bowl in January. Oklahoma is trending for Bo Bentley. That's the program he grew up rooting for. His family loves Oklahoma. He's taking a lot of spring visits, including Oklahoma. Florida State's trying to move the needle. LSU's in there. Ohio State's in there. So Florida State's not the only program trying to make a move with Bo Bentley. Florida State's recruiting 2 guys committed elsewhere, so we'll see what happens. Keyshawn Henderson, he's the 5-star from Houston, committed to the Cougars. He looks loyal to Coach Willie Fritz and that staff. They offered him when he was considered an athlete recruit that camped at Tulane and earned an offer as a quarterback at Tulane. And then when Coach Fritz and them moved to Houston, it just made it easier. He jumped in the fold and loves Houston and shows no sign of flipping, but he is maintaining communication with programs because he says you never know where these coaches are going to end up. Florida State is one of them. An intriguing name to maybe keep an eye on is Jaden O'Neal. He's committed to Oklahoma. But if Oklahoma lands Bo Bentley, does Jaden O'Neal want to be part of a 2-quarterback class? My guess is no. So we'll see how that continues to play out. Oklahoma would love to sign 2 quarterbacks, so it's up to them to make all parties feel comfortable. But Bo Bentley was the first offer that Coach Arbuckle, their new offensive coordinator, made, and there's just a lot of Oklahoma ties there. But Jaden O'Neal is someone that's still out there for Florida State.
Intrigued me really because they recruited him previously. He knows Norvell pretty well. That's a guy that is very connected to the staff. So to that point, I agree that you could see something there. I think Duckworth's really high on them with the ties that you mentioned of him and Gus. And really, before we get to Matt about his thoughts, because I know he's got some stuff to share about Jaden, but just spring visit. For him, for these quarterbacks, they want to see what this offense looks like in the spring setting. Steve, what do you think they're kind of looking for?
Well, certainly they want to see how they fit in the offense, but they're also looking to see what kind of NIL opportunities you have at Florida State as well. And we've seen the Seminoles be very competitive in that arena. I think they could all look at Florida State and see it as a place where they could compete right away. And come in as a true freshman and get on the field. And at a place like Florida State, the magnitude of the Seminoles, there's not many places that play that brand of football where a true freshman is going to have a chance to make an impact. But I truly think that Florida State's depth chart is still a work in progress at quarterback. And when you look at the young guys in that room, if you're one of these 2026s, you're thinking, hey, I can beat these guys out and come in there and quickly become the face of Florida State football.
Yeah, and Matt, to that point, you can address. I know you've dealt a lot with Jaden O'Neal, and just in general these quarterbacks. I think with Landon Duckworth and certainly Bo Bentley, who you know pretty well is from Texas, but just overall, just kind of what's your thoughts on the quarterback cycle, and just maybe some thoughts on who stands out or what to look for this spring.
Jaden O'Neal is a guy where that's the domino effect, right? As Steve pointed out. I talked to him late last week, and he said that he talks to Coach Tokar's weekly. He hadn't been on the phone yet with Norvell. He sounded like that was getting worked out, that he was supposed to, and it didn't happen because of scheduling. And Gus wanted to talk to him. So that one's kind of heating up a little bit. Again, domino effect. You just kind of have to see how everything plays out. With Bo Bentley and OU, obviously, Dallas area always has a lot of ties to OU. It's not that far. It's only 3 hours from home. And there's a lot of alumni down there. You get 1 game a year in Dallas with Red River, so you get a chance to play at home, which is a big deal for a lot of kids. So that's going to be hard to pass up for a kid from that area. Diabell, another guy who Florida State has been in contact with, but I kind of see that as a big long shot. As much as you would like to keep him in state, he seems pretty locked into Texas. He's talked a lot about recruiting those guys to Texas. So I would be very surprised if they jumped out of nowhere for that one. But I think your 3 are Bo Bentley, Landon Duckworth, and Jaden O'Neal, depending on what happens.
Yeah, I definitely think it's Landon and Duckworth and for Jaden for me. When I look at this room, that's kind of the focus. But moving on, Steve, to a guy that I think has really picked up steam is running back Carson Baker, 4-star running back. I know you guys like a lot. I think he's visiting Clemson this week, but overall. FSU seems to be getting some momentum going there. He's going to visit in the spring. He's also going to take official visit. He's actually the first official visitor that FSU has this year, visiting on the May 30th weekend. But I guess talk about him in general, just where things sit right now.
Well, I talked to him recently about Florida State, and I know he's excited to get back up to the Seminoles. He talked about getting there for a spring practice ahead of his official visit. That's May 30th weekend. He wants to see what it's like in Tallahassee, the environment, the culture, the staff. He can't wait to be there for the first time. So, yeah, obviously, they're battling South Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia Tech, Clemson just offered, and Ohio State. Those are some of the other programs he's high on, but he can really run, and he is dynamic with the ball in his hands.
You see a lot of these different recruits that you talked to, Steve. Obviously, adding Gus Malzahn, a former head coach at Auburn, a former head coach at UCF, a guy that has a history of running the ball. Is that a factor when you talk to these prospects, when you assume, because that seems to be his wheelhouse, where he's really good at utilizing and developing running backs.
Well, with the programs that Florida State's recruiting against, you got to have coaches with track records that they can point to as well. And Coach Malzahn's a veteran that's been part of some winning football teams and championship level football. So he's got a swagger to him when he recruits these kids, and he adds to the recruiting chops that Florida State has under Coach Norvell. And if you go back to Coach Norvell and his time at Memphis, they boasted some of the best running backs in college football, guys that were getting drafted. So Coach Norvell, when you look at his head coach running back history, is very strong. And that is definitely a leg that he's always been able to stand on. They identify well. They feature the running backs well. They make a lot of plays. And I think that's why you see Florida State close a guy like Usman Kroma at the end of last cycle. But you also don't close these guys without some coin. And again, I think Florida State is a program that's doing well on those fronts, and they're organized and very competitive for the top prospects. They see an opportunity to be earners at Florida State.
Yeah, certainly they're after a lot of top prospects. I know I'm not going to go through everybody, but guys like Caden Hall, DB from Milton, guys like Trenton Henderson, a defensive end from Pensacola, and then guys like Cam Brooks, a 4-star edge from Thomasville, just up the road. Seems to be they're really prioritizing places that are close to them and also in state. Steve, but I guess any intel you have on some of these guys already, as far as in the process going into these spring and summer visits, or guys that you want to chime in about as far as FSU targets?
Yeah, well, Caden Hall's taking his time going through his process and taking visits, and Florida State's one of the programs that he's certainly interested in. Wide receiver is a position that Florida State's continuing to attack this cycle. They have a big board there with some electric guys at the position that they would love to add to make sure that this offense is potent moving forward. Coach Norvell, in his history, they're typically tough to stop on offense. And last year was just an awful season, more interceptions than touchdowns, struggled to be consistent moving the ball. Again, they went into the portal and landed some guys that I think could really be helpful when you're talking about, Deuce Robinson coming into this program, and then some of the freshmen they signed like Javon Boggs, but they're in on some big time receivers this cycle. Calvin Russell, Jason Lopez, Justin Williams is a new offer from Buckholz, Brandon Bennett, Samarian Wingo. Those are guys that are top targets. Wingo was offered in December, visited in January. So they're looking to impress these guys and stay in it.
There's some guys in there, like 4 or 5 that they are starting to trend for in a better direction. I've covered some of them in the hot board, but just give your reflection on just the spring recruiting and some of the top targets.
Yeah, one that stands out to me is running back is Xavier Crowell from Jackson, teammates with Landon Duckworth, who we talked about earlier over in Alabama. He's one who again, He's probably going to visit in the spring. I think he has an official visit set up already. He's really high again on Coach Malzahn. He likes that he runs the ball. We've noticed so far that Malzahn's offense is going to be run the ball at all costs and then throw it deep. So, and that's what I learned when I was at the coaches clinic in Orlando from his presentation. So that really resonates with him. He really likes that. Obviously, it's hard to get kids from Alabama, but that's one of those guys that, if him and Landon Duckworth both like it together and both like Gus Malzahn, you could try to see they could maybe see themselves playing together at Florida State. Steve also mentioned Samario Wingo from over St. Augustine, Jacksonville area. That is one where Tim Harris Jr. is huge. Having him at Florida State is really big for that recruitment because he also offered him at UCF. And then as soon as he got to Florida State, that was one of his first offers out.
A guy that I really love that's in this class right now is Amari Clemens. Averaged over 12 yards a carry as a junior, scored 34 touchdowns, can also catch the football. Had a big sophomore year too, 22 rushing scores. He's also a threat in the kick return game. He is someone that could be very dynamic for the Seminoles moving forward. When you kind of talk more about some of these major defensive targets, obviously I think that starts with defensive end Trenton Henderson. You talked about J.J. Johnson. That's an uphill battle. Kendall Gerville is a key interior player at the jack position. You got guys like Jake Krull, T.J. White, who visited in January. Tristan Givens is someone that Florida State's been on for a long time. They have the linebacker Maycock committed out of Miami Central, Karan Maycock. He was back at Miami this week, man. He's got some really good film. Guy that Florida State's going to have to battle to keep in the fold. But if you get Maycock, Lanze Williams, they're still trying to flip Xavier Griffin from USC. Again, Florida State, they're in on the right guys right now, getting them back to campus multiple times, showing them the potential. Hey, come help get this thing back on track. But I think a lot of these guys are going to want to see it in the fall. Guys like Chauncey Kennan, cornerback, he's got an official visit locked in. So does Samari Matthews. These are two of the most talented DBs in the land. They're definitely in it for Tyreek Green out of Georgia. Brody Jennings, they're going to try and flip from Michigan. Dorian Barney's a major target. Obviously, Justice Fitzpatrick from in-state. Jalen Waters, he's been committed to Florida State. He's been committed to Florida. Maybe he'll commit to Miami. Maybe he's the Sunshine State Recruit of the Year this year. And could end up at Florida State as well at the end. He's been very fluid. Carter Lucky's a 4-star defensive lineman that could visit this weekend that they're in the mix for. So it's an exciting time at Florida State for going into the spring. Justin Williams, a receiver we talked about, he could visit this weekend after recently being offered. So they got the chops. I know I've said that multiple times, but when the results are there, they are a formidable recruiting juggernaut, and they do a good job in the portal. So when you combine that, their portal development, portal to FSU to NFL draft is some of the best that we've seen. They got a lot to hang their hat on, just unfortunately wasn't the season you wanted last year.
Guys, thanks again. Join us next time. As Steve pointed out, make sure you hit the like button. Follow Warchant. Certainly, we'll have a lot more coming up. There are a lot of spring visits, guys, because it's just about to crank up. As Steve mentioned, a few guys possibly could come this weekend. So, stay tuned to Warchant. We'll have a lot more coming up. And as Steve comes off the air, give me a little chop. So we're definitely going to have Steve back on. But, Steve, once again, thank you. Matt, thanks. And this is Michael Langston signing off.